everyone. Welcome to the September meeting of the City Council. Had to think there for a second. It's warm like summertime today. Appreciate y'all being here. And first order of business will be to approve the minutes of the August 11th regular council meeting and August 18th continued public hearing council meeting.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Further discussion? Not all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, vote likewise. Okay. Highway 321 Boulevard construction update. Kip could not be with us, so I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Kip had a pre-scheduled appointment for this evening, and I think he was going to email us some updates today, and he got in the office today and had a number of things that were pretty top priority. So he said he will be emailing us a list of updates. So if anyone in the audience would like to receive those, just email me. My email address is manager@townofblowingrock.com, and I'll be happy to forward those along to you. A couple items of note, folks may be aware and have already personally enjoyed the new right turn lane as you're coming into town from Boone. That right turn lane opened August 24th, and that seems to have really helped with the heavy traffic flow. We were prepared, if necessary, to try to direct traffic if there were some huge backups with the ASU game this weekend, and those, I think that right turn lane really helped buffer some of that traffic out, so that was a very timely improvement 1 week prior to the game. Also, starting August 28th, the southbound entrance to town at Main Street near the Blowing Rock Furniture Gallery was closed for a lot of stormwater work in that area, and it is slated to be open once again by the end of September. If the weather continues like it is, there is a chance that that may be open a little bit sooner, but they continue to work on that. And you can start to see some of the forming of the wall down at the northern entrance to town with some of the columns coming into shape, so that's pretty exciting progress as well. So those are more of a visual type thing, and DOT was very responsive with that new right turn lane to removing the no right turn on red sign. Having a lot more room to turn there. They felt comfortable with that. So another indicator of them being receptive to requests that we see every day traveling the road. So again, if you'd like those updates, once we get them from Kip, just email me, manager@townofblowingrock.com, and we'll forward those along.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Okay, T, you still have the floor for general obligation bond referendum update.
All righty. We thought this would be a good chance to provide folks with an update of where we are in the general obligation bond process. This all really got going with the blending of our 2014 comprehensive plan update and how that fits in. So I thought I'd cover a little bit about what that comprehensive plan means for us, especially relative to our infrastructure here in town. So it really serves as a guiding document for everything local governments are responsible for on a daily basis. And there are specific subject areas with a framework for implementation in that plan, and it really helps us set the roadmap for our future development. A number of specific areas are covered in the comprehensive plan, all the way from land use and development, parks and recreation, economic development, and then focusing specifically on our municipal services and transportation. Those are big key elements of our funding requirements as we go forward. There were kind of a top 10 list in no specific order of priority recommendations in that plan, and many of these have the potential to be quite costly depending on what the funding source and whether there are grants available. For example, the third one there, the multi-use path from downtown to Bass Lake, we applied for a Federal Lands Access Program grant earlier in the spring, and we were just notified last week that we've made it through one of the many hurdles of that processing request. So that one's looking positive at this point, but still we don't know whether we're going to be successful in that grant. But many of these can be quite expensive. So one of the things to help provide cost structure to that, we looked at our 10-year capital improvements plan focused on our transportation, parks, and water to determine what are the costs that are out there in our future. And one thing that became very apparent was that our existing cash resources were not sufficient to make significant progress on those plans. So looking at our various options, the general obligation bond referendum was seen as one of the least expensive forms of municipal debt. and it has to be approved by voters as it pledges the taxing authority to pay that debt back. And those funds are usually paid back over a period of 20 years. So then came forward the community investment bonds on the ballot last November 4th, focused on capital projects that help support our town infrastructure. There were 4 individual questions on the ballot totaling $13 million. So here's a summary of the voting results for the transportation bond referendum. It passed to the tune of 74% of voters. The $1 million for parks, a little bit less, around 73%. The $2 million for water, just under 80% of voters approved it. And then the $1 million for sewer, just over 81%, for an average of 77% of the voters approving all of the bond referenda. So that gave us something to work with, and with a reimbursement resolution, we actually had a pending stormwater repair at the intersection of Sunset and Cornish, and we were able to, in essence, advance that funding authority to go ahead and fund this particular project. So as projects move forward into the spring and next fall and over the coming years, because this authority is good for 7 to 10 years, you'll see these types of signs popping up around town just to let folks know that it's very likely that without this voter-approved bond authority, these projects would not be able to move forward, or certainly not as many of them or as quickly as we're able to move forward and accomplish them. So there's a pulled-out view. This actually replaced the failing culvert pipe underneath the road and repaved it, and then did a bit of stream work just the west side of this intersection near the cones in the distance. So blending that bonding authority with our most recent budget approval process, they played a significant role in the budget that the council approved this last fiscal year. For example, our total capital project budget in the adopted piece of the budget was $4,986,894. You can see the various project categories there. Our general obligation bond funding represented just under $4.6 million of that, or 92% of the capital project funding was afforded through the general obligation bond funding process. So it played a huge role in us being able to go ahead and begin the process associated with moving forward with many of these projects. A couple of the highlighted ones, the streetscape completion of Main Street, phases 5 and 6 were appropriated by council with general obligation bond funding in this most recent budget. Similarly, moving forward with design funding to do something very similar along Sunset Drive from Main Street down to Valley Boulevard. Realizing we probably didn't want to take on all 3 of those at one time, but let's go ahead and get the design underway so that by the time our next bond phasing comes into play a couple of years from now, we'll be ready to go and can move forward with construction for that project. Another example of something we'll be able to move forward with is a sidewalk replacement from Main Street down to Wallingford. But in total, just over $500,000 of road failure repairs, a little over $500,000 for ditch line repairs, another $100,000 for culvert replacements, and then town-wide $839,000 to pay for paving priority projects across town, with the goal being by the time all of the bond funding is executed over the next 7 to 10 years, we'll be able to pave each road in town one time, which is the expected lifespan of roads in Blowing Rock of about 10 years. So to give you an idea of how that fits in with our bond execution process, in June, council adopted the budget, which included all of those capital projects we saw there. In July, council approved the first Tryon advisors to assist us preparing information that the North Carolina Local Government Commission will need, as well as rating agencies in their approval process. This fall, we will move forward and solicit bids for some of the major construction projects to confirm our pricing estimates are still in play going forward. In January, we'll make an official presentation to the North Carolina Local Government Commission to move forward with the actual sale of the bonds. And then similarly, we'll present to the rating agencies. This is Fitch, Moody's, and Standard & Poor's. So we'll determine this fall whether we're going to present to one or more of those in our evaluation process. And that all leads us up to actually getting the cash in the bank when we borrow the funds in March, which fits in very well with our project activity time here in Blowing Rock. We can't exactly do road paving all year round, so this will fit in nicely to fitting in and prioritizing our remaining projects will be bid, and then we'll be working on project coordination and execution going forward. So Mayor and Council, that provides an update of where we are with our general obligation bond referendum process.
Thank you, Scott. Does anyone have any questions for Scott? Good job. Okay, consent agenda.
We have one item on your consent agenda this evening. This is more on the operating side of the budget. This is moving forward with our vehicle and capital replacement equipment financing package bid award. Bids were sent out to area banks, and staff is recommending a bid award to First Citizens with a 1.51 annual interest rate for a 4-year term with an amount not to exceed $435,000.
What's your pleasure?
Make a motion we approve. Second.
Motion and second, further discussion? Not all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote no. Motion carries. Thank you, Scott. Okay, public hearing. Kevin. Removing single-family and duplexes from design standard regulations.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to provide a little bit of background to this draft ordinance first. In and around 1997, commercial design standards were drafted and included in the town of Blowing Rock's land use ordinance. These standards applied to duplexes, condominiums, apartments, and commercial and institutional buildings. Essentially, all non-single family structures were regulated with respect to commercial design and appearance. In 2005, the land use ordinance was further amended to require that single-family homes in the central business zoning district meet the design standards and materials for commercial buildings. This amendment required that single-family structures in central business and subsequently the town center would be subject to color and materials criteria and reviewed through a zoning permit process. This summer, the North Carolina General Assembly adopted Senate Bill 25, which placed limits on how local governments could regulate building design elements, including color and materials for single-family, townhouse, and duplex structures. Included in your packet is a copy of Senate Bill 25, which is also Session Law 2015-86. Also enclosed is a summary from David Owens of the School of Government on this subject specifically. And to be consistent with the recently approved session law and the North Carolina General Statute, staff recommends that Article 21 of the Land Use Ordinance be amended to remove single-family, duplex, and townhome structures from commercial design standard regulation. The Planning Board reviewed this draft ordinance last month, and they recommended approval as it was written. And specifically, there were some questions in our discussion period about how this might apply if a structure was going to be used for something other than single family, perhaps in downtown. I think Wes Carter had that question. And looking at our minutes from the Planning Board, if the single family was going to be used for a business, well, then it's no longer governed by the building code with 1 and 2 family. It's now in a business occupancy. And so we could regulate design and appearance with respect to that home now being a business. But if it just remains single family, we would not have the authority based on general statute to regulate color, roof down.
Changed use.
Right, the changed use, it would have to.
Commercial standard.
That's right. The other question was whether or not we regulate single family anywhere else other than downtown, and we don't. We haven't, and we currently don't anyway. So with that summary, the draft ordinance is in the very first part of Article 21 that applies these standards to the various types of buildings we have in town. And what I've done there is, what has been highlighted is I struck through duplexes and townhomes as it originally applied to non-single family structures. And then further, the section, a few sentences down, is where we added that in 2005 to apply commercial design to our single family in downtown. So we struck that language out. And then further down is the other specifics that related to single family downtown. And staff recommends that we remove that language as well. So I'd be glad to answer any other questions you might have regarding this ordinance.
Yeah, and forgive me being brain dead, I've been flying all day. So if I build a single-family home in downtown and I abide by all the single-family requirements, I decide I then want to make it a commercial business and I do a change of use.
Right.
But I leave it like it was a single family, you know, the colors and everything. That's fine.
Once you change the use, if the colors meet our color chart, then it's fine. But if your house was purple, for
Then I'd
example,
have to
and you were
change
changing the use, then you would need to
Then
change
I'd-
that
then I'd-
compliant with the code. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, when you first started, you used the term condo, and then you switched to the term townhouse. Is it both, because they're a little bit different?
If it's regulated by the 1 and 2 family building code. Condo, I guess, is really more ownership. So specifically, it could be condominiums if it's a duplex. If it's a 2-family structure where they may own just within the walls of the building. That's how condominium would be in there. Otherwise, if it's a 3-unit condominium, they're regulated by commercial design.
And the change of use would probably be the tattletale philosophy. If they changed it and didn't come to town and ask for it, somebody would tell them that they were using it for something else, basically.
That
That'd be the way that works.
Yes, sir, that happens.
Any comments from the public? Yeah, Jeff?
I haven't read SB 25 and I'm a little bit confused. Is this just talking about new buildings or is this also including existing structures?
This would be, this applies to new construction going forward from when this was enacted. So we can't regulate design for, we wouldn't go back and change something.
But like I said, existing homeowner, they couldn't paint their house purple once.
They could today, yeah.
Okay, so it's not just new structures.
No, it's not new structures, but if a new home, we had an application for a new home in downtown where we used to regulate, we would no longer regulate that color. And if someone had an existing home and they wanted to change the color, we don't have the authority to say what color.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay,
Or roof or anything else.
right. We still, the general statute had some exceptions, and we can regulate bulk, height, where the house is placed. So our normal zoning regulations would apply, but the design standards and materials and color do not.
Any other questions, Kevin?
We don't have much choice.
No,
Not much.
only if they were to change the use.
Right.
Okay, do I hear a motion? We close the public hearing if there's no more questions?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote no. And now we'll entertain action on this.
Make a motion to adopt the new policy set forth now by the state.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Further discussion? Like Albert says, don't have a whole lot of say in this now. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, vote no. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, speakers from the floor. We have Ms. Regina Felsmaker. She lives on Wallingford Street, and she'd like to talk about the police chief flag.
Yeah, I know those of you that know me probably thought, oh no, what's she coming to complain about tonight, especially when I walk in with Mom. But we're not here to complain or fuss or argue about anything. We're here to thank you for the plaque, the new plaque that is put outside in the honor of my father, William Green, the chief of police. The other plaque was stood a little over half a century, because I know it was put up originally, and it had been refurbished 2 or 3 different times, and it just was not looking very well. But the new one is excellent. It looks great. I love the way it's tilted so people can read it. You don't have to get down on your knees and see what's going on. But it's a great plaque, and I hope it stands another half century. But just thank you.
Thank you.
It is greatly appreciated by the family.
That's the least we could do for someone who gave their life in service to this town.
Well, we do appreciate it.
Thank
I mean, I speak for my mom, my brother, my sister-in-law, and me, but we do appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Happy we could do that. Anything else?
I heard we did get the machine in for the hydrants.
Yes. Yeah, we're in the process of scheduling training for Public Works Utilities and Fire Department staff so that we can get rolling on doing that maintenance work. Yeah.
And what was that? I didn't hear that.
So this was the piece of machinery we purchased so that we could install cutoff valves on fire hydrants so that we wouldn't interrupt service to customers while we're doing maintenance on fire hydrants.
Yeah. Little too late, right? Anything else?